So moving on now, I want to go to this health report card. This is an idea I came up with writing the book of how do you really focus people's attention. And I think for most people, the most focused we get is when back in school when we'd get these report cards, because then it was all stories aside, it was just broken down to a simple letter grade on a report card that told us and everybody else how well we had done. So I took that idea and turned it into the health report card and put it into a scale so we could get our GPA out of this thing. Because as with anything, it's a combination of everything together and how we're doing. So on the far side over here, we have your current body weight. So plug that in there. Blood pressure. You should know your blood pressure. If not, we can take it at the clinics. But especially as we age, we need to know what our blood pressure is. Energy level, we're going to get to in a little bit. We're going to go through all these and then explain what they mean. Blood glucose level, you get that from when the doctor does the labs on you. They'll do a fasting glucose test. We'll talk about that in a little bit too. It's just levels. Cholesterol obviously is also from the blood test. We just did your health age, so you can go back and recalculate it if you want. And then your fitness score is your score on your test that we did at the clinic. So you should have that number, or your coach can give you that number. So then we're going to go through and assign a grade to those. And then the important part is, where do you want to be? What's the goal? So this is where we currently are. This is the goal of where do we want to be for all of these different indications. And then will I make the progress? So this is our plan. Well, we're doing the weekly weigh-ins right now to make sure we're on effect. And then what's the daily discipline to make this happen? So a big believer in daily discipline. And to get our weight under control, it's continuing to get that activity and getting that meal plan, staying with that and keep it under control. For blood pressure, and you'll see it's either activity or meal plans on all these, except for the health age, which is just to increase the number of habits. So we're going to come back to this because we're going to click through some of these and give you a little more background information on several of these items, just so you can see. For grading scale, obviously an A is excellent. You're in the good range for the objective measurements, or within 10% of your ideal. So again, I'm not a big fan of like a specific number for weight, but how about if you're within 10% of your ideal, then you're an A. A B is good. You're within 20% of your goals. C's are averages, and you'll see the average on here. Averages, and then D's you're below the average by 20%, and the F is you're greater than 20% off. So again, it's just to draw some mindfulness to it so we know where we currently are, and then from there, how do we progress? So that's the biggest part of it. Let's see. All right, so now let's go over on the move down through some of these. So the first one's going to be the body mass index. Now, I'll be the first one to tell you that I hate body mass index. I don't like the calculation. I think it's you guys that are all old enough to remember going into the doctor's office and they had the scale on the wall and it said if you're this tall you should weigh this much, and it was just basically your weight and height. So somewhere along the line they decided that that wasn't ideal, and then they turned it into a calculation, which is this body mass index. So to get it, it's this strange calculation of your body weight in pounds and then your height in inches times 2, and that gives you a number, and then you multiply. Well, you divide your height by your weight times 2, and then you multiply by 703, and that gives you your body mass index. So this is now current thinking in medicine. You'll hear BMI or body mass index all the time, but I have a problem with it for this reason. There's not everybody's not made the same. There's these three body types that we've been talked about. There's the endomorphs, the mesomorphs, and the ectomorphs. This originally came out of research in psychology where the guy was trying to tie personality to our body shapes. But if you just objectively, with mindfulness, look around the world, you'll see the endomorphs out there. The endomorphs are kind of the apple-shaped bodies, put on weight all over, kind of have the round appearance. The mesomorphs are the muscular people, broad shoulders, narrow waists, and then athletic, put on muscle easily. And the ectomorphs are the tall, skinny people that have narrow shoulders, narrow hips, but are really tall and lean. So again, these are stereotypical body types because it really is more like this. We know there's mesomorphs out there that look like a pure mesomorph, and there's ectomorphs and endomorphs, but most of us fall along one of these scales. We're not a pure, you don't see too many pure of any of them. We're somewhere on one of the sides. We're either between an endo and a mesomorph, or just kind of that bulky, or what's the old classic word, husky appearance. And then you'll see the people out there that have narrow shoulders but wide hips. And then, of course, the different versions in between the meso and the ectomorphs. So there's just such a wide variety of body types out there, and that's my problem with BMI, is that it doesn't take into account what the body weight is. Is the body weight fat, or is the body weight muscle? Because muscle weighs more than fat. So just because somebody weighs 250 pounds, it could be a 250-pound linebacker in the NFL that's all muscle, or it could be a 250-pound sedentary person that is the majority of fat. And yet the BMI would give them the same ranking. They would technically be obese on the scale of BMI, even if it was an all muscle person. So there's some drawbacks to it. It's the current kind of thinking, but lots to work on there. So the real standard is percent body fat, but that has a lot of limitations too. There's different ways to do it. There's calculating your body fat. There's you can do it through skin fold calipers. You can do it through underwater weighing. You can do it through bod pods. There's a bunch of different ways to do it, but every one of those has limitations based on how much body fat we have. They're more accurate with people with the least amount of body fat, so it doesn't really help us in the wellness world trying to figure out where people are. So now with blood pressure facts, blood pressure, this is straight from the CDC a few years ago, but it's estimated that about 1 out of every 3 U.S. adults, 31%, has high blood pressure. So not a good statistic. High blood pressure is a major risk factor for heart disease, stroke, and congestive heart failure and kidney disease. So that's why your doctor's so hung up on blood pressure. So when your docs see you getting into high blood pressure, they're really worried about it because it is a major risk factor for all these diseases. It's listed as a primary contributing cause of death in 326,000 Americans in 2006. But it's such an underlying thing, you won't see it show up. It's always usually deaths due to heart disease, stroke, or congestive heart failure, or kidney disease. And it's not reported as a cause, but it's the underlying cause. 25% of Americans have hypertension or blood pressures that are higher than normal. So if you really think about it, you add that number to that number, and we have 56% of the American adults that are either pre-hypertensive or hypertensive, which means high blood pressure, right? So here's the standard. Here's where the numbers fly. So on this side, systolic is the higher blood pressure. So basically all blood pressure is when your heart beats, there's a pressure there's two different pressures, the high and low pressure. So when they blow up the sphygmometer or the cuff around your arm, systolic is the pressure that pushes through first. So that's the high end pressure. The low end pressure is the diastolic, or it's the last sound. It's the least amount of pressure before you can't hear anything in taking a blood pressure. So normal is anything systolically under 120 and diastolic over 80. So this is where they get the numbers like 120 over 80. It's systolic over diastolic. So anything under that, so 110 over 70 would be considered a normal one. When you get into the 120, and this is where it starts to go to ORs, if your systolic is between 120 and 139, or your diastolic is 80 to 89, you're considered in that pre-hypertension stage. So that's that 25% of adults that are in that range. Either this one's too high or this one's too high. If you have a systolic of 140 to 159, you're considered hypertension stage 1. Or if your diastolic's between 90 and 99. So it's either one. If either one of those is that you're in this stage. If either one of these numbers hit, you're in that stage. In order to be normal, both numbers have to be under that. That's the only and. So high blood pressure stage 2 is systolic over 160 or diastolic over 100. And then hypertensive crisis is an emergency, medical emergency. You want to see people move fast when you go to the emergency room with a systolic over 180 or a diastolic over 110, and you'll see people get going. So you just need to know the number. How do we reduce it? Well, we reduce it through diet and through exercise. Now with blood pressure, obviously there's medications too that can reduce it. But to get off the blood pressures, we got to get the body moving normally. There is some other tricks, like working your larger muscles can really help decrease it. Using like your leg muscles first. So that's why when we're exercising, especially if you have any blood pressure issues, you always want to do your leg muscles first and then go to your upper body. You never want to start with your upper body ones because they're much smaller. Here's the blood glucose levels. Looks like we're going to time's flying as we talk about this. So for blood glucose is when the doc does the testing and looks to see where you're at. So if you're normal when they do this fasting, this is A1C. This is the new standard. So you want an A1C about 5 is normal. 5.7 to 6.4 is considered prediabetes or metabolic syndrome, and then above 6.5 is technically diabetes. If you're looking at the fasting glucose, which is normally they don't track this until this one is abnormal for several months. This is a 3-month running total. So with fasting glucose, anything above 126 is considered diabetes. Anything between 100 and 125 is a prediabetes, which is also called metabolic syndrome. It should be below 99 when they do that test on you. And then there's also an oral glucose tolerance test, and those are the numbers for that. So you just got to know, again, the goal is to be down here. But this is where we have over 24 million Americans have been diagnosed with type 2 diabetes based on this, and we have about 80 million pre-diabetics in the country. That's the big fear they have with a lot of this stuff, is that we've got all these people coming through. Cholesterol. Having cholesterol puts you at risk for heart disease, the leading cause of death, which is the leading cause of death. Approximately 1 in every 6 adults, 16%, has high cholesterol, as defined by total cholesterol over 240. And then the average American, the average level is 200 milligrams per deciliter, which is borderline high risk. So again, there's different types of cholesterol, but it's below 200 is considered desirable. 200, 239 is that borderline. Anything over 240 is high. But there's another kind of cholesterol. LDL is the dangerous one. So these are the bad, this is the bad cholesterol. So anything below, you want it below 70 to be ideal. Or below 70 is ideal for people at very high risk of heart disease. Below 100 is ideal for people at risk of heart disease. 100 to 129 is near ideal. And then 130 is borderline high. So again, it's not anything above 160, 189 is high, and anything above 190 is very high. So what they're saying is, if for people that are at very high risk because of family histories, you want it, the lower you can get it, the better. But around 100 is where you're looking for on this LDL. HDL is good cholesterol, so the more of this you can get, the better. And it's actually the ratio they look at, the HDL to LDL ratio. So if you're below 40 as a man or below 50 as a female, that's poor. Below 40, between 49 and 40 and 49 for men is better. 50 to 59 is the women's range for better, and the best is 60 milligrams per deciliter or above. And you get more of this by, again, the diet you eat and by exercise can increase our HDL levels. So then the vitality test, this is just a little test I came up with. This is the vitality test, meaning when you wake up first thing in the morning, what do you feel like? If you feel like you're totally exhausted and can't get out of bed, that's a 1. If it's a 5, 6, like, oh, I'll be able to make it, that's a 5, 6. And then 10, 9, 10 is, I'm excited for the day. I jump out of bed, ready to go, ready to take on the day. So, again, it's just a mindfulness. And it's not saying that every day is that way, because some days we wake up and we're just exhausted, and other days we feel like we have energy. So it's just a matter of like trying to figure out where you're at. So I'm going to do this real quick just to see on average how you guys have been feeling on your vitality test. Are you low end of the scale, 1 to 2? Are you in the middle? Or are you on the high end of a 9 to 10, the Energizer Bunny that is ready to get out and wakes up with tons of energy? All right, awesome. So again, a nice split between kind of all over the board, from the 3s to the 9s. So thank you for voting on that. So we're going to go, so again, it's just something to follow as you're going along, just to know where you're at, and then do you start getting more and more energy as you go along. And then, of course, your fitness score was what we gave you based on that test you did at the beginning and the end. So now it wraps us back to that health report card where you can go plug in your numbers. And again, it's in your workbook too. So plug in your numbers, your current numbers here, and then grade yourself on where you're at here. And again, don't beat yourself up. It's not necessarily important that you have the grade you want right now, because this is really the important one. What is your goal? Where do you want to go? So for each one of those, what would you want the numbers to be? And the charts, we put the charts in the workbook too, just so you can see, if you're pre-diabetic, then I want to get to diabetic. If I'm pre-hypertension, I want to get to normal. If I'm stage 1 or stage 2 blood pressure, I want to get down to pre-hypertensive, and then hopefully work my way to normal. But go ahead and just plug in your stuff there. And again, this is just for you to work on. And then go across, and how are you going to monitor it, and are you willing to do these things to get where you want to be? Because as we've ended with the last several times, the only person you are destined to become is the person you decide to be. So click back on here. So thank you for hanging in there and listening to me. I think I'm running a little over, get to talking too much, and then I don't know when to shut up. So it's awesome that you guys are plugging in this. I know today's like, just like any time you get a report card, it's like, man, I'm not happy with what I see. But that's not the point. The point isn't to be happy or upset with, you know, what you see. It's where am I? It's the mindfulness of knowing, okay, here's where I'm at and here's where I want to go to. So here's what I've got to do to get there. It's re-energizing that rider to help you get where you want to be at the end. So make sure that you hang in there and that you know the numbers, but you also know where I need to go. And that just gives that rider a little bit more energy to try to keep that elephant on task, because that's the biggest problem we've got. So with that, I know I'm over time. I will let you go. I just want to say thank you again for hanging in there and listening. Keep up the good work, and I will see you soon.